Hi there, mamas. Hope you're having an absolutely lovely Wednesday so far. So in today's Facebook Live, if you saw, I just posted about an hour ago to let you know what was happening today, but I'm going to be talking about packing lunches for picky eaters. And actually, the things I'm going to be talking about are applicable whether you have a picky eater or just a child who, you want to get them to eat a little bit more variety or maybe try some new things. All the things I'm going to be talking about today are really relevant for all kids when it comes to packing lunches. So we are about 1 month in, almost a month in to lunch packing season, and I thought this was a great topic to talk about because I've already heard some moms kind of complaining. I think this is something that a lot of moms struggle with. And so before I get started, I'd love if do you find packing lunches stressful? Oh, hello. Nice to see you. If you do, give me a thumbs up. I want to know kind of who out there finds packing lunches to be something that they find stressful or that causes them, just to kind of to dread it, really. Now, before I kind of get into the topic, I just want to let everybody know that I am kind of doing things a little bit differently today. I have a lot of information I wanted to get out there, and instead of you guys just looking at my face the whole time talking, I have put together like a little bit of a presentation, so hopefully it works well. If you have questions as we go, feel free to just add them into the comments or add them in the comments and I will get to them at some point. So if I don't get to them right away, then I will, at the end of the presentation, we'll go back and kind of go through the questions as we go, okay? So for those of you who do find lunches stressful, whether you have a picky eater or you don't have a picky eater, I'd love to know why. So, what is it about lunches that you're finding particularly stressful or challenging? I did put this question out to the group a couple of days ago, and I got some great responses. So a lot of people out there I know are looking to get more variety into their picky eaters lunchbox, which we're definitely going to get to for sure. There were a few comments, people looking to get ideas on what to actually serve in the child's lunch. And that is a totally valid concern for sure. I know that's something that a lot of people struggle with, and I am going to touch on that a little bit, but this is something that I always kind of say in a lot of my kind of workshops and presentations and when I'm working with parents is that I don't necessarily provide specific ideas around what your child should eat because I do think that that's very individual. So depending on where your picky eater is on the spectrum of kind of what they're eating or how picky they are. They may like certain foods, not like certain foods. Every family has different foods that they enjoy together, depending maybe on their culture. There could be intolerances at play. And so I am going to provide at the end of this a couple of resources for you to get some ideas for lunches. But today we're going to talk more about strategies to get your child on board with trying new things and with the idea of eating a wide variety of food. And so it's not so much going to be exact foods that, your child will eat because I wish I had a list of healthy foods that all children would eat, but that is just not possible. Okay, so let's talk about those strategies, shall we? I am going to just get this presentation up for you. I will show my face a little bit, I guess, as we go, but I want to just give you some visuals here as well. Okay, so when it comes to packing lunches for picky eaters, one thing that I hear from a lot of parents is that they are trying to get their child to eat healthy foods. And that is a very valid desire, right? We all want our children to eat healthy. I think sometimes that the lunch is something that a lot of parents really focus on because, our children are at school, which means that ideally they are learning. They're probably, pretty active and using a lot of energy. And we want to make sure that we are fueling them in a way that's going to set them up for success, right? So if you are one of those people that's like always trying to think of, what foods can I get my child to eat that are healthy? This is totally normal, and it obviously comes from like a really good place. But I want you today to try to look at school lunches from a bit of a different perspective. So I'm going to ask you to do a little bit of a shift in your mindset, okay? So what I mean by that is that if we are really focused on trying to get our picky eater to eat certain foods, this can often backfire and can actually cause them to eat less of the foods that we want them to. And I'll get to that in a minute. Instead, if we really want to set our picky eaters up for success when it comes to their lunch boxes, and if we really want to make sure that that lunchbox comes home empty, maybe not empty, but at least comes home with enough food eaten that you aren't concerned about their ability to learn and all that kind of stuff. Also, if you really want your picky child to start moving towards being a healthier eater and you want them to accept more foods, you want them to eat more variety, you really are going to have to shift your mindset. And there's a couple of things that I want you to really think about when you're packing your child's lunch. The first thing I want you to think about is, how can I make lunch more enjoyable for them? And the second thing I want you to think about is, how can I use lunch as an opportunity to expose them to variety? So I'm going to go through both of these mindset shifts, and with each of these, I'm going to give you a few strategies that you can use with your picky eater that, if you're able to kind of shift your mindset this way, you're really going to up the likelihood that they are going to eat some of the new and healthy foods that you actually include in their lunchbox. Okay? So let's start with, how can I make lunch more enjoyable for them? So again, what we kind of talked about earlier, if we are looking at our lunches, our school lunches, in a way that we're just kind of trying to figure out how we can either trick them or bribe them or pressure them to eat some of the healthy foods that we include in there, that can often mean that lunchtime is something that kids dread or don't look forward to, okay? So when kids are feeling that kind of pressure to eat certain things, or, maybe feel like they're disappointing you if they're not eating certain things in their lunch, they may get to lunchtime and actually dread opening that lunchbox because they're worried that you're going to pack things that they don't like, or, it's just the whole thing can maybe cause them a lot of stress. And so you are actually, more likely to see success if you can get them to a place where when they come to lunch, they're in a great mood, they're excited about their lunch, and they are confident that when they open that lunchbox, there's going to be something there that they actually want to eat. Okay? So I always say to parents, I want you to think of it this way. If you are including only things in their lunch that they don't like, then very often they will be very, very anxious coming to that lunchbox. So the first tip here kind of on this is that you always want to make sure that you're serving something that your child likes and can fill up on in their lunchbox. And so what I mean by this is that instead of expecting that they are going to eat an entire lunchbox full of new and challenging foods, you want them to come and open their lunchbox and be confident that there's something there that they can eat, okay? So imagine you had a busy day at work and you used your brain a lot and then you went outside and ran around for a while. If you came to lunch and you opened your lunchbox and you were starving and there was absolutely nothing there that looked appealing to you or that you actually liked, that can be really, really stressful. And when children feel that anxiety at a meal, any meal, that can actually cause their appetites to decrease and make it much less likely that they're going to eat anything. And so that's the first tip, is that you want to just make sure that, you know, there's something there that they can eat. It's going to fill them up for the rest of the day. And that way they are actually more likely to try something new if they're feeling kind of comfortable like that. The second piece in terms of making lunch enjoyable for kids is that you actually want to include them in the process. So sometimes, you know, it can be easy. We're really busy. We just, you know, make the lunch and put it in their bag in the morning, and they actually don't know what's in there. If we include them in the process, it actually can make them a lot more likely to buy into what's in that lunchbox. So we all know that power struggles are a huge thing with kids, right? And so sometimes when a child feels like they don't have control over a situation, that can just cause them to do the opposite of what you want them to, right? So this is very true for lunches. If a child is opening their lunchbox and there is, you know, kind of nothing in there that they expected, or maybe they asked for something and you never have given it to them, they're going to get their back up, right? And they're going to just out of spite maybe not eat what's in there. And so by simply asking your child what they'd like to see in that lunchbox, you're really kind of getting that wall to come down. And if you're including them in the process, that doesn't necessarily mean you need to only pack the things that they suggest. It just means that in every lunch you are, you know, just taking their opinion into consideration, right? If there's something that they, you know that they've requested, make sure that you include that once in a while, or include it at some point during that week. Like I said before, if you can do this and you're genuine about it, you are going to make it much less likely that they are not eating their lunch just because they want to drive you crazy. Okay, does that make sense? Hope so. Okay. So now that we have, you know, made sure that the lunch experience is pleasant for your child and that they're not kind of feeling anxious, they're feeling included in the process, so they're not going to put up those power struggles. Now I want you to really look at lunch as another opportunity to expose them to variety. So one of the biggest things when it comes to raising a healthy eater instead of a picky eater is that we need to expose our kids to as much variety as we can, as often as possible. So even if they don't eat all those foods, they need to continue to see them time and time again and get used to them if we expect them to eat them again in the future, or eat them at some point in the future. And so my first tip here is kind of very obvious, but it's to make sure that you're including a lot of variety in that lunchbox. I'm just going to take another drink here, guys. Sorry. So while this tip might seem obvious, I just want to kind of emphasize that the reason behind this is not so much from a nutrition perspective. So yes, variety is really important when it comes to nutrition, because that's how kids are going to get, you know, the vitamins and nutrients that they need. But the reason it's really, really important to include variety in the lunchbox is that this gets kids used to the idea of seeing variety, okay? So let me paint this picture for you. If your child is really picky, I know there's lots of kids out there that are basically eating the same thing day in and day out. So if that's your kiddo that has the same lunch every day, if you were all of a sudden, decided to pack them a lunch with all foods that they've never seen before, that's going to be really kind of scary and shocking to them, right? And they aren't used to that variety, and so their chances are they're probably going to be upset, probably won't eat anything in there. And so you want to really get them used to the idea that when it comes to food, when it comes to lunches, they are going to see variety all the time. And once they get used to the idea of seeing variety, then, when they're ready to actually try something new, it's not going to feel so scary to see those foods, okay? So you want to make sure that you are rotating foods as often as possible. So if there are only a few things that they like right now, you just want to rotate those. Make sure that you're never serving the same thing 2 days in a row, okay? So as much variety as you can is really important. Next is that you are going to want to start to incorporate some new food. So we talked earlier about making sure that there's always at least one thing that they like and that they can fill up on. And that's really important. But you also want to start to, change those things up slowly in order to start getting them used to the idea, like I said, of variety. One of the things I often see with parents when it comes to, introducing children to new things is that they kind of go from 0 to 100. So what I mean by this is that, say you have a picky eater, again, who only eats sandwiches every day, which is very common. If all of a sudden you were like, you know what, they need to start eating some variety, we're going to expose them to something new, and then you put chili in their lunch, that is literally like, going from, like I said, 0 to 100, right? That is a huge leap for your picky eater to make. And the chances of that being successful are probably pretty small. So think of it this way. If you, think about yourself. If you were a couch potato and you didn't ever do any sort of exercise, you weren't very physically active at all, and then somebody told you that tomorrow you had to run a marathon, right? How likely is that it's going to happen, right? It's not very likely. You really need to take things very slow when it comes to making major changes. And so in the example of the marathon, like clearly you are going to, maybe start going for walks. Then maybe you would start jogging, short amounts. And then you would start doing longer runs. And eventually you would work your way up to the marathon. So the same thing is true when it comes to the picky eaters, right? You want to introduce them to things slowly. And the best way to do that is to change up their favorite foods first. So, hold on, give me a second here. I just want to double check something. Okay, sorry. Okay, so change up their favorite first. I love this picture here because this shows, at the very basic level of this tip, if your children or if your child really loves sandwiches, changing up their favorite, you could just chop it up into little pieces, right? Again, this is all about getting them used to the idea of different and variety and seeing, differences in their lunches before you start really trying to introduce things that are just a little bit too advanced for them. So whether it be cutting up their sandwiches in little pieces, or chopping carrots into coins instead of carrot sticks. This particular picture has cherries, so you could do white cherries instead of red cherries, right? So those are just kind of baby steps when it comes to trying something new. And if you can start there and kind of get them on board with those small changes, and it's going to be a lot easier to work their way up to some of the bigger changes, okay? So that's just changing up the way you cut things. Once they've gotten used to that, then you could start moving into actually making subtle changes to their actual favorite foods. So sandwiches, for example, you could swap out the grape jam for strawberry jam. You could use ham instead of turkey. You could do a Swiss cheese instead of a mozzarella cheese, right? So you get the idea. It's just making those tiny incremental changes to their favorite foods and then working your way towards bigger changes eventually. Um, and also, I mean, the other thing I wanted to mention with this is that, again, it's not necessarily about them accepting certain foods, right? So it's not saying that mozzarella cheese is necessarily healthier than Swiss cheese. It's just that you want to get them used to accepting change, right? So once they accept, okay, fine, I will eat this mozzarella cheese instead of the Swiss cheese. Once they actually accept that, they're more likely to accept something different again in the future, right? It's just kind of that you're building a skill, and that skill is trying new things, and you need to build that skill slowly. Okay. Does anybody have any questions? If you have any questions, feel free to throw them at me. I feel like I'm doing a lot of talking, but I know it's all really, really good info. Okay. So the next tip when it comes to exposing them to variety is to include one fruit and one vegetable every day. So again, not only is this providing them with the opportunity to try something new, but we all know that fruits and vegetables, when it comes to raising a healthy eater, are really, really important. And I know that if you have a really picky eater, maybe they won't, at this point, eat any fruits or any vegetables. And so maybe it can be discouraging to actually put them in their lunch, but I want you to really, again, think about exposure to variety. And the more that kids see foods again and again and again, the more likely they are to, at some point, be okay with trying them in the future. Also, if a child sees fruits and vegetables in their lunch every day, then that becomes normal to them, right? So at first, it might be really something that they get upset about, or they kind of try to resist. But if they start to see that every day, it's just going to become the norm. And then that day where they're feeling a bit more adventurous, those fruits and vegetables are there, and it's not a lost opportunity, right? When they're kind of feeling ready to try something new. So you want to include at least one fruit and one vegetable every single day. Now, the next thing when it comes to exposing them to new and challenging foods is that you want to make sure that you are including something that is a little bit challenging every day as well. So again, going back to what we talked about earlier, you will make sure that there's something there that they can eat, that they're comfortable with, and that they can fill up on, but you don't want them to get too comfortable, right? You want to make sure that seeing new foods and seeing foods that maybe they don't love as much is something that is absolutely normal and is something that they're just going to have to get used to, because you're not going to stop, right? You need to just be consistent with that. And so by including at least one challenging food every day, you are just getting them used to a wide variety of foods, and the idea that new foods are something that they're going to see. The other thing is that you never know when your child is going to be feeling adventurous, right? I find that school lunches are actually one of the best the best opportunities to expose them to new foods, because you aren't there putting pressure on them, which can often happen at dinner time or breakfast time. And they're surrounded by their peers, they're having fun, they're in a good mood. And very often I've had parents tell me that their kids will eat something in their lunch that they don't necessarily eat at home. And so you don't want to pass up that opportunity that, they may be having a day where they're feeling extra adventurous or extra hungry, and that they might try that new food. So every day include something completely random. I know that there's been many days where I've put something into Tyson's lunch thinking that there's no way he's going to eat it. And and it's gone when he gets home. So I think it's a really good strategy. Oh my goodness, guys. It is so dry in here. Maybe I'm just talking too much. Okay, and then the last thing I just wanted to quickly touch on when it comes to packing a lunchbox for picky eaters is to make sure that you do have some gear. I say the right gear, but what I mean by the right gear is that I'm a big fan of bento boxes when it comes to packing lunches for picky eaters. Now, I know a lot of people have those now, so that maybe this is something that you're already doing, but I'll tell you a couple of reasons why bento boxes are really great for picky eaters. Number one, it really allows you to kind of organize their food. So and make it very visible for the child. So we've talked a lot about variety and exposing them to new things and fruits and vegetables and making sure that there's something that they like. Well, you want to make sure that they're seeing all of this, because if you have everything in separate containers, what can often happen is that certain containers never get opened, right? They do not have a lot of time at lunch, and so you want them to be able to open that container. It's all there for them to see. They can make choices based on, all the different foods that are there. And you just want to make sure that they have the opportunity to see what you've packed for them. And a bento box is a really great way to do that. The other reason I like bento boxes is that when picky eaters get food that is, not completely what they were expecting, like maybe something that gets squished or leaks, that is just really a complete deal breaker for them a lot of the time. For most kids, actually, if their salad dressing is leaking onto their sandwich, the chances are they're not going to eat that. And so a lot of these containers are leak proof and mean that the lunch is going to look really nice when they open it at school, very similar to what it looked like when you packed it. So these two that I have here, we've got a Yum box and, oh goodness, what is that one called? Green box, I think. I'll have to put it in the comments. These are the two that I use right now, but there's a lot of great ones out there. One of my favorite places to get lunch gear is an online store called Fenego, and I will leave the link to that in the comments as well, or in the notes as well. It's a great online store. They've got a lot of really cool lunch gear, including bento boxes and things like that. So you might want to check them out. Okay, so that's it, guys. So that is kind of the mindset shift that I find very, very helpful when packing lunches. And so I want you to give these tips a try, because I'm pretty sure that you will start to see a huge difference in terms of, your child's willingness to eat their lunch, as well as your stress levels going a bit down in terms of what to actually pack. So that is part of my message as well, is that, try not to get too overly caught up in exactly what's going in your child's lunchbox, but also try not to stress too much if they don't eat their lunch. I know that is really something that is easier said than done, but if you are following these strategies and you are making sure to include something that that they like, if they're choosing not to eat that is their choice, right? That is a choice that they are making, and you are doing everything right. And then, sometimes we just have to accept that maybe our kids aren't hungry, or maybe they were distracted. I mean, this happened to me yesterday, actually, when I picked Tyson up from school. He was so cranky, and when I kind of started questioning him about it, he admitted to me, "Mom, I'm so hungry. Like I did not want my lunch, and it was disgusting." And I had packed him a thermos full of, we had this pasta dish the night before, and he had actually asked for it in the thermos, and so I had packed it for him in the thermos, and he was just complaining how it was disgusting and he didn't want it. And I actually have to admit, I was starting to feel really like, oh my gosh, I'm doing a Facebook Live on lunches tomorrow. Clearly I don't know what I'm doing. But, we got home, and I ended up offering to heat it up for him, as an after school snack, and he ended up eating the whole thing. So for whatever reason at school, whether he got distracted, sometimes he likes to blame me for things, regardless of whether it was, that he didn't like it or whatever the issue was. Sometimes kids just don't eat their lunches. And so, there's always another chance to pack a lunch the next day, and hopefully, we can, kind of be kind to ourselves and realize that it's not always our fault, right? So that's it. I did promise you that I would have a resource. We're at half an hour, which I like to keep them half an hour. So I do have a resource for you guys. I have for those of you who are looking for some ideas in terms of what to pack for lunches. Like I said, I think every kid is different, and so it's hard to have a list of things that every child will eat, but I do have a list of lunch and snack ideas just to kind of get the juices flowing and inspire you in terms of different things that you could be packing in your child's lunch, and in order to just have a bit of variety. So I will leave a link of where you can sign up to download that, and any of the other things I talked about today, I will also make sure that I leave some links and notes about that. If you have any questions about school lunches, about, packing lunches for picky eaters, absolutely just leave them in the comments, and I will follow up and answer them later. All right. Well, thanks to those of you who watch live, and for those of you who are watching the replay, thanks for tuning in as well. And we will see you soon. Happy lunch packing. Bye.